But first of all, it's really just setting up everything that we're about to show you right now. We know we're looking for the carcass. We're looking for, the carcass has appeared. So we want to make sure the timing is right. We want to make sure the location is right. And we want to make sure the group that it appeared amongst is right. So we're going to look at timing, who, where, and then we're going to present the carcass. So as far as timing goes, we read in Genesis chapter 15, we're reading about the covenant that God formed with Canaan. We're reading about the 3 carcasses that he divided against each other, and the turtle dove and the pigeon. Again, carcasses appears. You know that whenever you see carcass, it represents the gateway back into the garden. Abram wants to know, whereby shall I know that I'm going to inherit this land you're giving me, this land of Canaanites? Well, I'm going to destroy, if you understand who the 3 carcasses that were divided represent, there are 3 different kingdoms that appear through history that make up the government of the Antichrist in the end days. God's going to destroy these 3 by turning them against each other. When you read through the Bible, you see his ability to cause armies to destroy each other. So Abram believed him back then, but Israel actually saw him in action. But he's going to cause these kingdoms, these accumulated kingdoms, who have now become the foundation of the Antichrist kingdom, to just kill themselves right at the gateway of the altar, because every sacrifice is offered at the gateway of the garden. But of course, the turtle dove and the pigeon, the turtle dove represents the dove that went and found the olive branch that signified that there was a land available. And then of course the young pigeon, it can be trained on how to go home. So no doubt events of finding the land and events of going home, those individuals who participate in finding land and going home, those individuals are not divided. Those individuals are not affected by the judgment of Christ, and they're actually a part of the whole covenant. And that's how Abram's going to know that he's going to tell some people about the new land. He's going to bring them into the new land. He's going to show them how to get home. But the rest of the covenant is fowls came down on the carcasses. Abram drove those carcasses away. A great horror came upon him. He fell asleep. His people go through 400 years of slavery. Now you got to understand that he brings them into the land of Ham. He baptizes Abram. God baptizes Abram into the things of Ham. That's why he changes his name. Abram's people go through 400 years. If you understand the history of Africans, they go through 400 years. So you have a parallel. The beginning is the ending. So of course Abram's people go through 400 years of slavery. Ham's people have to go through 400 years of slavery. We have a chart right here. I know you can't see it, but we're going to have illustration posted on the DVD so that you can actually see it, but I'm going to go ahead and point to it for myself as I explain it. But what I have here is I have the Exodus, 400-year period of slavery from estimated 1850 BC to 1450 BC. Okay, so what we have is, we have the Exodus, which was from an estimated 1850 BC to 1450 BC, 400 years. Then you have the period of silence. But let me go back. Exodus was for the lineage of Shem. Everyone gets baptized into a 400-year period of the 3 sons of Noah. Noah is the original covenant, the very first covenant, the original covenant. And so each son gets baptized into 400 years of slavery. So anyway, Shem gets baptized into slavery underneath the sons of Ham. Then the period of silence from the book of Malachi into the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. During the period of silence is the time of philosophies. If you look back to the history of the Europeans and of all the lineage of Shem, they were baptized into an abyss of thought. And even to this day, they love to get in discussions where you're just constantly thinking about a topic but never coming to a conclusion. That's like an enslavement. When I say they, I'm not talking about the whole group. I'm just talking about the group that persists and just thinking all the time but never having a conclusion. Politicians do that. They constantly tell us what the solution is going to be, but we never get to it. So the period of silence is the baptism into philosophy, baptism into an abyss of discussion. That happened when Alexander the Great, part of that happened when Alexander the Great began to push eastward, getting baptized into Oriental mysticism, mysticism of the Orient, and also just philosophies during that time, with Socrates and Plato and all the other philosophers that came along during that time period and that were being studied amongst the Greeks. Then you have the Atlantic slave trade from 1480 AB to 1880 AB and 1480 AB. I say AB instead of AD because AB means after birth of Christ. The Portuguese taking slaves out of Africa officially built a slave fort in Lima, Ghana, and began to sell Africans as products, trading them for guns and wine and all sorts of things. And that started the slave trade, and it ended roughly around 1880. And I say roughly around 1880 because even though the ban to take slaves out of Africa ended in the early part of the 1800s, around 1880, I believe, the law was passed to where if you take a slave out of Africa, you receive the death penalty. So I believe it really died down around 1880. When you research the book of Daniel, you find there's a period of 490 years. And so what happens is, we're talking about the timing here of the appearance of the carcass. So what happens is, if you add 90 years to 1880, which is talked about, spoken about in the book of Daniel, you come to around 1970. So we're talking about timing, right? So when you get to around 1970, you have a group of people who have gone through, worldwide, gone through their 400 years of enslavement. Abram is in Canaan land, finding out secrets about what God is doing amongst the sons of Ham, finding out secrets about the end time, that in the end time God's going to bring a 400-year enslavement amongst the sons of Ham, and that it's actually going to be a 490 year. You know, God gives you bits and pieces of the story. It's actually going to be 490 years. Again, that brings us to 1970. And so around 1970, you should begin to push into the promise, because after each 400-year enslavement, you begin to push into the promise. When Israel came out of Egypt, God led them into Canaan land to go into the promise. When the sons of Japheth, when the disciples were sent over to the sons of Japheth to bring them out of the entrapment and enslavement of philosophy, Paul began to organize them into an economy that represents the garden, to free them. Now we have the Atlantic slave trade. Again, it ended in 1880, but it's a special period. It's different from the previous two because it's the real thing. The previous two couldn't be made like the real thing because the real thing has to be like the real thing. So it's actually 490 years. When you read the book of Daniel, it says 490 years have been determined upon thy people to finish up the transgression, to finish up the sins. It mentions people and city. You go back and read in Daniel, I believe it's chapter 9. Matter of fact, I'm going to pause and I'm going to get that on the read. Okay, as I was saying, I want to go ahead and read the book of Daniel. I want to read about the 490 because on my illustration here, you see that there's 3 400-year periods. We're talking about the timing of the appearance of the carcass. The 490-year period that happens last for the sons of Ham actually extends itself all the way up to 1970. And if you understand that the 3 400-year periods are all layered on top of each other, then you understand that there's this period we have to wander in the wilderness, which is a 40-year period. So when you layer the 3 400-year periods on top of each other, you find that there also has to be, with the 490, a 40-year period of wandering in the wilderness, which replace the appearance of the carcass, and it has to come before the year 2010. And I'm not a date setter, but I am a season. Pay attention to the seasons. But it should be by the year 2010 that you should see the carcass. It should be a mainstream thought. It should be something that's in the public for everybody to observe.